I work full-time, I work regular hours in the securities business. And I work hard. And I wrote this book beginning in January of '09, 6 months. For 6 months, I got up every day at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, took a quick shower and started writing. Would write till about 8:30. My office is 3 blocks from my apartment, and then I would go to work. But just think about that 6 months. Put it in perspective. In October 2007, the stock market hit its high of 14,000 and change on the Dow. Okay, then the troubles began in '08. This was '07, October '07. In '08, it began to slide. Lehman declared bankruptcy in September of '08, and the market ended up around 8,500 at the end of that year. That's about a drop of 6,000 points. It was not pretty. So that was December 31st, 2008. I began this book on January 1st, 2009. And then it kept on going. It hit the bottom March 9th, 2009, around 6,500. Now, in the meantime, this was the heart of the financial crisis. I was up in the morning. It's very peaceful and very quiet. And it's a very therapeutic thing to do, is to get up early and write. Bert says he gets up every morning at 5:30. I've never called him then, but it's a great time to write. And it was a great thing to do at that time because it just took my mind off that tough time. By the time I got to work, all of our clients were calling. There was, all these things rolling around. But because of that time I wrote it in, I really learned a tremendous amount about boxing. I read almost 100 books, and I also learned a great deal about myself. Now, a few things about this book that make it a little bit different. At the end of the process, my publisher decided to get drawings done of each of the boxers, and I think they came out really well. I've blown up a few of them around the room, and so that sort of brought the whole thing to life, and I think that was really a good stroke. Now, I know everybody, in the world, and probably everybody in this room, doesn't necessarily love boxing. I know you're out there. That's just, it's a controversial sport. It's always been a controversial sport. So I made this book a very user-friendly book. And I mean it to be an inspirational book that anyone can pick up despite, what your preferences might be for sports or anything else. So in the back here, I think at page 174, I have outlined the rules and weight classes of boxing. It's 3 pages. And just goes through it very, very briefly. And then if you run across a term you don't recognize, I put a boxing glossary back here. So if you, let's say, go to page 181, and you see the term glass jaw. Glass jaw, anybody know what that means? Well, I'm sure you do. A boxer who is especially susceptible to a knockout is said to have a glass jaw or a glass chin. So I've tried to make this a user-friendly book. Now I want to give you 3 stories on this book that I think will give you a flavor of the composition of the book, and I think they're fairly representative. The first is round 8, Making Fear Your Friend, and it's Floyd Patterson. Floyd Patterson on the far left. Floyd Patterson was one of 11 children. He grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in impoverished conditions. Simply stated, he was afraid of his shadow. He just didn't like to be seen in public. He would hide in movie theaters. He would hide in subway stations. He'd do anything to escape the world he lived in. I don't think he really liked himself. Luckily, when he was 14 years old, he wandered into a boxing gym with his brothers here in New York City. And life took a fateful turn, as it does sometimes. He met a man named Cus D'Amato. Cus is considered one of boxing's foremost authorities on the subject of fear. And he really took a very interesting approach with Floyd. He helped him move past his fears by making him realize that his opponents had the same fears too, that they feared him just as much as he feared them, and that he could overcome his fears and have more confidence in his own ability by just training harder, preparing better, and being more ready to get in the ring with someone. It's a great concept. According to Customato, fear is natural, fear is normal, fear is your friend. Without fear, we would not survive. Well, it really worked for Floyd Patterson because in 1951, 2 years later, he became New York Golden Glove middleweight champ. In 1952, he was selected for the Olympic team. He went to Helsinki, Finland. He knocked out all 5 opponents and won the gold medal as a middleweight. At 17, he turned pro. And he became heavyweight champion of the world. I think many of you know most of the rest of the story. But he didn't duck anyone. And he was kind of a small guy. And he would fight anybody. He fought Liston twice. Got knocked out in the first round both times, but he fought him. He fought the man that beat Liston, Muhammad Ali. So he didn't win every fight, but he continued to draw strength from his fear. Now, as a businessman, I use the same plan every day. We all experience fear. Who in this room doesn't get afraid of something? I mean, there's fear of failure. There's fear of losing money. There's fear of embarrassing yourself in front of clients or colleagues. There's fear of damaging personal relationships. There are all kinds of things to be afraid of. Now, the worst thing for me as a businessman is to go to a presentation in front of a board of directors and be asked a question I should know, not know the answer to it. So what do? I get up earlier, I prepare harder, I think everything through, I make sure I'm ready. In fact, it's often the fear of not doing my best that motivates me to go the extra mile. The payoffs for this are terrific. That's the way you make your reputation in business. That's the way you make your reputation in boxing. That's the way you win. At the end of the day, Floyd Patterson won a lot more than he lost, and he really dealt with his fears in a positive way. Okay, round 4 is the quality of being tough. And for that chapter, I've chosen Jake LaMotta. By the way, for each one of these chapters, I would get the topic organized, and I would select 5 different boxers that I thought that I could write about. And one of the hardest things was just whittling it down to which person I would actually choose. But for this, I chose Jake LaMotta. Jake LaMotta, second on my left. You may recall a movie that came out 25 years ago called The Raging Bull. In my opinion, one of the greatest movies of all time. The movie starred Robert De Niro, and it won every Academy Award you can think of. Jake LaMotta is alive and well. He's a friend of Bert's and mine. He'll be 88 years old next month. But his story is really quite remarkable. He was born and raised in tenement buildings and immigrant slums in the Bronx during the Depression. Now, he discovered his fist at a very young age, and he literally got into hundreds of street fights. And the reason he did it, his father wanted him to do it because he could tell he was really good, and he would make a little money, maybe a few pennies, maybe a nickel or a dime. But in the Depression, it would help pay the rent, it would help put food on the table. So now, Jake wasn't perfect, believe me. He got into a lot of trouble as a teenager. He had repeated brushes with the law. That's only the beginning. I'll stop there. That's the bad news on Jake. The good news is he was always tough. He was as tough as they come. And he used that toughness in the ring. He wasn't the most talented boxer. In fact, he did not have anything like the grace and finesse of Sugar Ray Robinson, Many people consider Sugar Ray Robinson the best fighter of the 20th century. Would you agree with that, Bert? Jake LaMotta actually beat Sugar Ray Robinson once. He lost 4 times to him, but he beat him once. Now, he would wear his opponents down with sheer will and determination. He fought in a bull-like, straight-ahead, take-no-prisoners style, never taking a step backwards. It was amazing to watch him fight. And he also had to fight many outside influences, or maybe outside enemies. What I mean by that? Back in the 50s, when he was fighting in the 40s and before, the mafia actually played a pretty big role in sports, including boxing. And he resisted kowtowing to the mafia. He stood up to them for the longest time. He finally, I think, had to make some kind of a deal to be able to fight for the championship. But he really stood up to them. This enhanced his reputation as being tough, but it slowed his career down a little bit. But above all, Jake LaMotta had a tremendous will to win. And this propelled him to become middleweight champion of the world. Now, throughout my life, I have observed the benefits of being tough. First, tough doesn't mean that you're a bad guy, that you're evil, that you're mean. In fact, as a little boy growing up in West Texas, where I'm from, one of the nicest things you could say about me was, "Oh, John Oden, he's tough." Now, that meant, that I would stand up for myself, that I wouldn't let people push me around. I mean, that's a positive. Even today, as an adult in business, what's the nicest thing you can say about somebody that is out there doing business? Well, for me, I would like for somebody to say he's a tough negotiator. He really stands up for his clients. He simply won't give up until he gets the answers he needs for this important research question. So I really believe in business and in life and in boxing, the toughest guy doesn't always win, but he's always respected, he or she. And toughness can give you an edge to help you overcome odds and succeed. Now, moving on to my favorite story, George Foreman. How many people have you seen lose jobs, take a career misstep, maybe lose a lot of money, make a bad investment, so bad and so catastrophic that they just felt like they had to dramatically turn things around? Well, the chapter on George Foreman is called Reinventing Yourself and Making a Comeback. George Foreman was born in Houston, Texas, and in his early formative years, he was a complete thug. He was a bully. He drank all the time. He was involved in mugging and petty theft. He dropped out of school at the age of 15, out of junior high school. And he realized that he was well on his way to becoming a criminal. And this was a daunting thought. So again, another life-changing event. He turns to the TV set one day and he sees an ad for something that Lyndon Johnson started called the Job Corps. And it was a program that was started way back when to give hope to no-hope kids like George. So he applied, and miraculously, he was accepted. So they shipped him off to Oregon, and all of a sudden, the light went on. He started to study, he started to learn, and he started to box. And he was really, really good. So he ratcheted that up a notch, and he got into amateur boxing. And he did very, very well. So this was about the time of the Olympic Games in '68, so he tries out for the team, and lo and behold, he makes it. He goes to Mexico City, and he wins the gold medal. And he comes back, an Olympic hero. Then he meets a guy named Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston was the original baddest man on the planet before Mike Tyson took over that title. He had a cold, steely, menacing demeanor. He was an ex-con.